When I first met my husband, Daniel, he seemed like the perfect man. Charming, attentive, funny. He checked every box. We dated for 2 years before he proposed in a candlelit restaurant, and I thought I was stepping into a fairy tale. For the first 5 years of our marriage, everything felt normal. He worked in IT consulting and often traveled for business. I worked as a nurse, with odd shifts that made our schedules a little unpredictable, but we made it work, or so I thought. The cracks started small. He began guarding his phone like it was a state secret. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe it was work-related confidentiality. But then, he started taking work trips twice as often, sometimes disappearing over weekends without much explanation. One evening, while he was away in Chicago, I was folding laundry when his tablet pinged with a notification. He never used his tablet much, so curiosity got the better of me. I tapped the screen and saw a string of messages. They were from a woman named Clara. The messages weren't just flirty, they were intimate. They talked about picking up their son from soccer practice, Clara cooking his favorite meals, and planning a family trip to the mountains. My stomach twisted. A son? At first, I thought maybe Daniel had a child from a past relationship he hadn't told me about. But the timestamps made it clear. These messages were recent, overlapping entirely with our marriage. My hands shook as I scrolled, finding pictures of Daniel holding a little boy who looked eerily like him. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with questions, betrayal clawing at my chest. By morning, I decided I couldn't just confront him without proof. He was smart, careful. I needed something undeniable. Over the next few weeks, I quietly became a detective. I went through credit card statements, noting restaurants and purchases made in a town an hour away. A town I'd never been to with him. I followed him once, calling off a shift at work, and watched from a cafe window as he strolled into a park with Clara and the boy. Seeing them together made my heart ache in a way I can't fully describe. He looked happy, carefree, and I realized with a bitter clarity that I wasn't just competing with another woman. I was competing with an entirely separate life. The more I uncovered, the more furious I became. He wasn't just cheating. He'd built a whole second family behind my back. And the cruelest part? He'd been celebrating birthdays, anniversaries, and milestones with both of us, carefully crafting his lies. That's when the idea hit me. If Daniel loved playing the part of the perfect family man, then I'd shatter that image in front of everyone. His upcoming birthday party, which I was already organizing, would be the stage for his grand unmasking. I threw myself into planning the birthday like nothing was wrong. If Daniel suspected I knew anything, he didn't show it. He was as cheerful as ever, telling me which of his coworkers and friends he wanted invited. He even suggested we book the same upscale restaurant where we'd celebrated our anniversary. While smiling and nodding, inside, I was meticulously plotting. I reached out to Clara anonymously through a brand new email account. I told her I had information about her husband, and that we needed to talk. At first, she didn't reply. Then, 2 days later, she agreed to meet me at a coffee shop halfway between our towns. When Clara walked in, I instantly recognized her from the photos. She was pretty, with an understated style, and she looked tired. Not the glamorous other woman stereotype I had pictured. She ordered a tea, sat across from me, and I introduced myself. Her expression shifted from polite confusion to shock as I told her I was Daniel's wife. I expected her to deny it, but instead, tears welled up in her eyes. She whispered, "He told me you were his ex. That you were bitter and still causing him problems." My stomach dropped. This wasn't a mistress knowingly wrecking a marriage. She thought she was the only wife. We spent over 2 hours comparing timelines. Every business trip he told me about was a weekend away with friends, he told her. The little boy, Lucas, was theirs, conceived just after our 3rd anniversary. Clara had photos, text threads, and even receipts of vacations he'd taken her on. By the end of our meeting, we were sitting in stunned silence, realizing how deep his lies went. Then Clara surprised me. She didn't want to shield him. She wanted him exposed just as much as I did. The anger in her eyes matched mine. Together, we hatched a plan. She and Lucas would accidentally show up at his birthday party. I would have the evidence ready to display in front of his family, friends, and colleagues. The next few weeks were excruciating. Every time Daniel kissed me goodbye or texted me "love you," I had to resist the urge to scream. But the thought of his smug face when the truth came out kept me going. I printed out enlarged photos of Daniel with Clara and Lucas. I had screenshots of his texts ready to display on a projector at the restaurant.
Ow.
The manager, a friend of mine, agreed to let me use the AV setup for a surprise tribute. On the night of the party, Daniel was in high spirits, greeting guests, soaking in the attention. His mother hugged me and told me how lucky he was to have me. I smiled tightly, knowing what was about to unfold. Clara texted me that she was outside, waiting for my cue. I took a deep breath. The moment of truth was here. I slipped away from the crowd, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. Outside, Clara stood with Lucas holding her hand. He was shy, hiding behind her leg, wearing a little button-up shirt and looking utterly confused. My chest tightened. This innocent child had no idea his father was about to be publicly exposed. "Are you ready?" I whispered. Clara nodded, her jaw set. We walked back inside together, weaving through the guests toward the head table where Daniel was laughing with his best friend. I tapped my glass to get everyone's attention. "Excuse me, everyone." Before we cut the cake, I have a little surprise for Daniel. There were cheers and whistles, and Daniel grinned, clearly expecting some sentimental slideshow or speech. The restaurant lights dimmed. The projector flickered on. The first image appeared. Daniel holding Lucas in a park, smiling like the picture-perfect dad. Except none of his friends or family had ever seen this child before. A ripple of confusion spread through the room. I clicked to the next slide. Daniel and Clara at the beach. Arms wrapped around each other, date stamped for the same weekend he had told me he was visiting his brother out of state. Murmurs grew louder. Daniel's smile faltered. "What is this?" He barked, half standing. I ignored him and clicked again. Screenshots of his texts to Clara. "Can't wait to see you, babe. You and Lucas are my real family." Gasps erupted. His mother covered her mouth, eyes darting between me, Clara, and Daniel. Clara stepped forward, holding Lucas's hand firmly. "Everyone, my name is Clara. This is my son, Lucas. Daniel is his father. And up until this week, I thought I was his only wife." The room fell silent, except for the faint clink of someone setting down a glass. Daniel's face turned red, his mouth opening and closing like he was searching for words. He stammered. "She's lying. This is some kind of setup." But Clara pulled out her own phone and scrolled through pictures. Lucas's birthday parties, family outings, hotel bookings, all under Daniel's name. A few guests stepped closer to see, whispering to each other. I crossed my arms. "How many business trips, Daniel? How many times did you look me in the eye and lie?" My voice shook, but not from fear. From the sheer adrenaline of finally confronting him in front of everyone who mattered to him. He turned to his parents, pleading, "Mom, Dad, you can't believe this." His father's voice was cold. "Is it true?" Daniel hesitated, and that was all the answer they needed. Clara and I stood side by side, united in our disgust. Around us, the whispers turned into open condemnation. His boss, who had been seated nearby, muttered something about needing to discuss this Monday before walking out. Daniel looked trapped, his perfect little double life crumbling in real time, and I was far from done. The room was frozen in awkward tension, but I wasn't about to let Daniel slither his way out. I stepped forward, placing myself squarely between him and the door. "You've been living a lie for years, Daniel. Today everyone gets to see the truth." He scoffed, trying to recover some control. "This is pathetic, Emma. You're humiliating yourself in front of my family. My friends. Your family." I cut in sharply. "Do you mean me and our kids? Or Clara and Lucas? Or do you just mean you?" A few guests actually gasped at my tone. His sister muttered under her breath, "Wow, unreal." Clara stepped closer, her voice low but razor sharp. "You told me Emma was your ex. You told me she'd moved on. You said you were single when Lucas was born. Every moment we shared, every promise you made, you were lying to both of us." Daniel's face was pale now. "Clara, please. We can talk about this later." "No," she said firmly, gripping Lucas's hand. "We talk now." I turned to the guests. Since Daniel likes to play the doting father so much, maybe he'd like to explain why Lucas's child support payments come from our joint account. Or why I found a second phone in his car. Hundreds of messages to Clara. Or maybe why he's been disappearing every other weekend claiming he had work emergencies. The crowd was shifting, eyes darting, whispers growing louder. His best friend avoided looking at him entirely. His mother's voice cracked as she said, "Daniel, how could you?" And then, like a dam breaking, the accusations started. His cousin piped up, "I saw you last Christmas Eve," with her nodding toward Clara. "I didn't say anything because I thought maybe you'd split with Emma. Guess I was wrong." Daniel looked cornered, eyes darting toward the exit. I moved aside this time, letting the moment hang heavy. "Go ahead," I said. "Run. But understand, we're not done. Clara and I have both spoken to an attorney. You won't just be losing your reputation today. You're going to lose everything." Lucas, too young to understand, clutched Clara's leg and asked, "Mommy, why is Daddy sad?" Clara bent down, kissed his forehead, and said softly, "Because Daddy made very bad choices." Daniel's father stepped forward, shaking his head. "Get out, Daniel. Don't come back until you're ready to face what you've done." For a man who had always thrived on control, Daniel looked utterly powerless. He grabbed his jacket and stormed out without another word. The door slammed, rattling the glasses on the tables. Silence lingered for a beat, and then the guests slowly turned back to me and Clara, offering quiet words of support. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined for his birthday, but it was the one he deserved. The day after the party felt strange, quiet, but not in a peaceful way. The weight of what had happened still pressed on my chest, though I knew it had been necessary. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at my phone. Dozens of messages had poured in overnight. Friends, family, even acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years reached out, some to offer sympathy, others to confirm their suspicions about Daniel. It was surreal to realize how many people had seen little hints of the truth, but never connected the dots. Clara came over that afternoon. We sat at my dining table, papers spread out between us. The beginnings of our legal strategy. The attorney we'd both spoken to explained that Daniel's deception wasn't just a moral failing. It had serious financial and custodial implications. Clara had evidence of his lies. I had proof of financial misconduct. Together, we were a united front. "You know," Clara said softly, "I almost feel bad for him. Almost. But then I remember the nights I sat alone, wondering why he didn't call, wondering why he was always too busy. Turns out he was here, living another life." I nodded, and I remember all the times he claimed to be at work late. "Turns out he was with you and Lucas. I'm done giving him sympathy. He's going to face consequences for once in his life." The divorce proceedings moved fast, faster than I'd expected. With so much evidence, my lawyer was confident. The biggest shock was Daniel's reaction. He didn't fight for custody of our kids. He barely fought for anything, really. It was like he'd given up before the battle even started. Meanwhile, word about his double life spread through his social and professional circles. The company where he worked didn't fire him immediately, but he was asked to resign within a month. No one wanted to be associated with his mess. One afternoon, about 6 weeks later, I ran into him at the grocery store. He looked thinner, tired, and older than I remembered. For a second, I almost pitied him. "Daddy!" Then he opened his mouth. "You ruined my life, Emma," he said bitterly. I took a breath, met his eyes, and said, "No, Daniel, you ruined your own life. I just stopped covering for you." Then I turned my cart and walked away, leaving him standing in the cereal aisle alone. By the time the divorce was finalized, I felt lighter. Clara and I stayed in touch, not as friends exactly, but as two women who shared a bond forged from betrayal. We both rebuilt our lives, focused on our children, and refused to let Daniel's lies define us. His birthday had been the end of one chapter, but for me, it was also the beginning of a better one where I no longer questioned my worth or ignored my instincts. And in the end, that was the best gift I could have given myself.